Welcome to Three Men in a Blog. Today my guests are Adam McVey and Deirdre Brock, both stalwarts of the SNP administration, joint coalition administration with the Labour Party here in Edinburgh. And welcome.
Thanks very much. Nice to
be here. Very pleased to have you, and I'm glad, good to have you back again, Deirdre. Deirdre is also Deputy Lord Provost.
That's right.
I kind of forget to sometimes give people their full titles. Try not to do it this time. Councillor McVey, welcome.
Councillor McVey, far too young to be a stalwart, probably.
Okay. Well, seeing as we've never met before, could you just give us a little, me and the viewers, listeners, a little bio?
Sure. Well, I've been a councillor since May. One of the new intake, one of the noobs. Before that, I worked for a social investment charity. So, like a charity that invested in things like community wind turbines and building community centres, that sort of thing. Social enterprise. Before that, I worked for Amnesty International, writing 2 reports on gypsy travellers in Scotland and the various problems that they have to encounter from the media and local government.
And were you involved in politics before you stood as a councillor?
Well, I was an activist, so I'd campaigned for Marco Biaggi during the Scottish Parliament election, and before that I hadn't, beyond sticking a poster on my window, I hadn't really been too involved in the party. A bit involved in student politics. I was one of those annoying people that kind of got involved in everything at uni and tried to rope everyone else into the debating union and the student union and all those things. So that's probably, I mean, politically, that's probably where most of my experience comes from, I suppose.
It's illuminating because, to me, your face appeared on the poster as the leaflet before the last election, and that was that. Deirdre, never asked you about, were you involved in student politics before you became a councillor?
I wasn't, actually. I wasn't.
You were one of the cool kids then, as opposed to me.
Well, I'm not quite sure why I wasn't, actually, because as I think I said last time, my father was always very interested in politics, and so there used to be quite lively political discussion around the dinner table, but no, I was pretty busy in, theatre and getting very involved in that, and it didn't leave a lot of time.
We might return to a little bit of the arts before this conversation is over today. There being a bit of a steer-he's-rammy on that score this week as well.
Yes.
Well, look, Deirdre, a lot has happened since the last time we spoke. You'd only been back in perhaps about June, no, more like July, I think, when I spoke to you last year. Been in for a couple of months. How have things changed? Have you made any progress? This coalition with Labour this time round, how's it been?
I think it's working well, perhaps to the surprise of some. I think we're, really forming some good, strong relationships with some of the councillors in Labour, depending on what committee we sit on. I mean, the planning committee, for example, I would say across the parties, in fact, is quite a close one, really, isn't it? It's interesting, and we have very sort of respectful and interesting debates on various planning issues. Can you compare that
to the previous administration, when you were in with the Lib Dems?
Well, I have to say, again, if you're in coalition, you have to make it work if you want it to continue. So you find ways of making it work. Liberal Democrats have, I suppose, slightly different priorities in some areas than the Labour Party, but we found ways of adjusting to each other, and I think, again, certainly, both at a sort of backbench level, but also certainly in the executive, there was a very good relationship between the senior councillors, and I think it's basically the same thing here.
Well, 6 months down, or 8 months down the line since you were elected, Adam, any surprises and things you didn't expect?
Well, I mean, I'm probably one of the people that expected there to be more teething problems than there have been. Right. But it has worked, like Deirdre says, it has worked really well. And it's been quite surprising. I wasn't part of the previous administration, but I wasn't really that clued up or involved about what was going on in the city council. But from what I hear, the atmosphere was quite a sort of tribalistic and quite combative one, and this time there doesn't appear to be that. even the Conservatives, who are in a sense the main opposition now in Edinburgh, are quite a kind of cordial opposition. The whole politics,
So that's
the dynamic.
Any successes?
Quite surprising.
Right, are we 8 months down the line? Can you point to any successes yet?
I don't know where to.
Well, I mean, a lot seems to be going better. Things like the massive change, although it was hugely problematic to enforce, but like the recycling regime changes will take our recycling rate in the city from the low 30s to probably near 50%.
I have noticed that now.
So-
I think there's about 10 different
Yeah.
refuse trucks come to this
Yeah.
address every week, and they seem to come. They now come any day of the week, any time.
Yeah.
No longer Monday to Friday.
Interestingly, today at the Transport Policy Subcommittee, that very issue is being discussed, and they are hoping to streamline the service and introduce changes over the next few months. This was an initial discussion. It will be coming back to the full Transport Committee for a final decision, but yeah, they're aware of those issues. They'd like ultimately to see all pickups perhaps done on the same day, for example, which would make sense. So you've got your recycling, your food, plus your sort of standard rubbish picked up on the same
I'm
day.
thinking in times of also, it took quite a while for some of the drivers to find their way around. I would see them. I sit here at my computer looking out the window. Refuse truck pulls up. He's got a sheet of paper in front of him. He looks up the alleyway. He looks down there. They've obviously never been here before.
Yeah.
And there was quite a lot of that went on.
No, and actually, I had the head of Waste Services. I was speaking with her. I had her in my office a couple of days ago to talk about these very things. And she acknowledged that at first there were obviously teething problems, new crews, new routes, and that had to be addressed. But she said she felt that things were bedding in. And also they're going to be introducing a computerised system, software, that will make these things a lot more straightforward, and that will talk to other sections of the council. So instead of having to make one phone call and then having to make a phone call to another section, and then it would all sort of happen automatically. So, I mean, these are changes that are going to be introduced fairly shortly, actually. So hopefully we'll see less of that.
So we call it recycling a provisional success at the moment.
I'd certainly call it a success in the rate. I mean, the rate is forecasted. I was sitting in another Transport and Environment Committee before the change, and we were sitting on something like 33-34% of municipal waste being recycled. And they said that the officers were saying they were on target to reach 50% in just 2 years' time. And I said, how can we possibly be on target if we've only increased by 1% a year? For the last 5 years, which has been good progress, but we're expecting to jump 16% in the space of 24 months. And they assured me we were on target, and to their credit, because the change has been so widespreading, if you like, now as a council we are on target, and we're probably going to hopefully exceed that 50% target.
As a consumer, and by necessity, there's a food bin round the corner. We don't have one here, but there's one just round the corner. And then there's glass, packaging, general. So that's 4 or 5 as the different lorries come. The food one seems to come twice.
There's a big garden waste as well.
Yes, I suppose there'll be a garden one for the gardens across the street. And of course, because I live in a block of flats, and the ones across the street are like terraced houses, they're two totally different pickups, and most of the time for them.
Yeah.
So I do see quite a lot of refuse trucks, but it's actually quite comforting when you see at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning, think, my God, these guys are working.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
Flexible working, maybe hopefully it suits them.
Yeah, I mean, tenements are the big sort of ones that we have to try and crack in terms of recycling. It's tricky,
so.
Things like, oh dear, I've gone on about this for some time, but I mean, glass, for example, has to be kept separately, not polluting other recycling materials, because otherwise it basically becomes not worthless, but a much lower grade, if you like, of recyclable material. Things like this all have to be. It's quite complex. It's not really just as simple as picking stuff up. But it does save us a lot of money in the long run if that doesn't go to landfill.
That's very true. You get big penalties if it does.
We do.
Right. Well, instead of thinking of successes, what about highlights of? Well, let's see, Adam. Highlights so far since you came in. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe not a success. What about the fact that the trams ran yesterday?
A tram, yes.
Alex Salmon made a joke about that
Did he?
at FNQ. Apparently, the strikes are all off, apart from the tube strike in London. And even the trams ran in Edinburgh yesterday, he said.
It was a big event. That's a series of little tiny milestones that will eventually get to an operating service, and I suppose yesterday was one of them. A very visual one, because you can actually, I think a lot of people tuned into the news and went on BBC News website to see a moving tram and thought, is that in Copenhagen? Is that in Dublin? Where is that?
But didn't get me started about the tram.
Well, no.
Don't get me started either, however. It does appear to be making progress, which is great,
that's
and all credit to people like Subaru such
let's take a swing into general politics of what's happening, because we don't want to we found out a little about you, a little progress from Deirdre, but I dare say there are a lot of other things happening in the political world at the moment, and of course it's kind of the end of the year. We've got an Edinburgh agreement for a referendum, and you're both SNP members, so I assume you're both pro-independence. I know it may sound stating the obvious, but...
Yes.
I'm sticking to my position for reasons that's difficult to say. I've normally voted Labour, but I'm very pro-independence. So we're not going to have an argument around this table. But there's been a fair old stooshy about racism this week. Now, you've got a clearly non-Scottish accent.
No, indeed. Yes, I'm even half English, so I have taken interest in this.
All my grandchildren are English, and I'm not going to give away more than that. But I also lived for 20 years in England. I'm a total Anglophile. I love it down there.
Yeah.
I can see I might move down there as I get more decrepit, if I don't die suddenly. And yet, apparently there was Alistair Gray, one of the great artists of Scotland, was accused of being anti-English. What did you think about this, Stacey?
I've not had a chance to read the article he'd written, the contribution he made to the book, but I did read Leslie Riddick's piece, which I thought was quite measured, rather more measured than some of the press around this.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, what about Kevin Williamson's position? I don't know if you've seen that.
I caught up with a bit of it. I'm not quite...
Well, even to some extent, Leslie, but this has been a topic that quite a lot of commentators have been talking about for quite a long time. There's no point in us getting an independent Scotland if the existing Scottish establishment still runs things, has been the argument.
Oh, yeah. No, so he was saying about getting... well, it's that whole... it's a long-running issue, isn't it, of sort of the authentic accents, if you like, of the people, versus sort of received English or received English-sounding folk. And I mean, for example, here's an admission. My father sent me to elocution classes when I was younger, and my sisters, because we all were starting to speak very strong like that. And he, with being English, wasn't so keen on that. Not that my father, we're working class, I'm the first person on my side of the family to go to university, but his father was a carpenter. But
well, I had English beaten into me. Well, English was spoken at home. In a school playground, it was Doric, fit like the day. I remember I used to get beaten for speaking like that at home.
Did you?
My mother was a school teacher. She was.
Well, look at the Gales and the way they were treated. And, my partner's grandfather was.
But I think Leslie Riddick said, we self-flagellate. We beat ourselves because we wanted to make progress in the world, and Gaelic wasn't the language to take. To make, if you want to
I suppose in when I was growing up, Australian was. Everyone was terribly on the radio in Australia.
Really?
Yeah, yes, very much, and TV as well. You had to speak like that to become an announcer, or a newsreader or whatever. Very properly spoken, and gradually that left us. And you could perhaps argue that left us. As we lost our cringe, there was a cultural cringe that the Aussies we were always accused of looking backwards to the mother country, and this was our yardstick, if you like, of how we measured ourselves. And yet, nowadays, I mean, you get some very broad Australian accents on television, although, of course, Julia Gillard is still being mocked for her really quite broad Australian accent.
She is Welsh accent.
She
is Welsh, isn't she?
Yeah. Have you seen her? Did you see her in action on that piece where she was having a go at the leader of the opposition, Tony Abbott?
Oh, yes, no, that was good. Okay, well, look, we're at the end of the year. Next week, I think we're going to have our own little show, wear silly hats and review the year ourselves. But given we've been reviewing particularly First Minister's questions, and I can give you the scores for today's MQs. Unfortunately, Joanne actually managed to get a total of 9 out of 30. Alex surpassed himself and got 26 out of 30.
Gosh.
We never given him that high. Ruth got 1. At least she wasn't minus this time. And Willie got 4. So that's we normally
quite as
they're normally a bit closer, but I think what happened today was Alex. They've been playing the man for weeks now.
Yes.
They've been attacking him for weeks and weeks and weeks. He finally snapped back at Joanne today, and because he said something about it being tomorrow, according to the Mayan calendar, the end of the world. This happens tomorrow, but every week Joanne Lamont comes to FMQs and predicts the end of the demise of Scotland.
Oh dear. Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure.
You wonder how effective that is as a tactic, don't you? Because she rarely seems to do anything other than start at 10 or 11, and you just think, and has been proved incorrect on occasions as well. You know, there was the case history she brought up once, I think.
There's plenty.
You just wonder ultimately how
what
it
about
goes down.
Alex? What kind of a year do you think he's had? I mean, according to Joanne, he's had a dreadful year, and next year she was saying that, I hope he has another year like this year. They seem to sit there smugly within their own little bubble in the Labour Party, imagining that because the unionist press says so, she's doing well. But outside their own little bubble, she is. Her speechwriter finally got name-checked today. Alex mentioned that her speechwriter was Paul Sinclair, so he got name-checked in the chamber.
Who used to be with the Daily Record, didn't he?
And she was gripping her speech as usual. And the camera swung round to Alex, and in frame was John Swinney and Nicola Sturgeon. John Swinney was going like this. I don't know what he was pantomiming, something that she normally does. And Nicola was holding a piece of paper like this, shaking it, because her hand shakes when she holds Joanne's hand shake when she would, and she always has this. The presiding officer reprimanded John Swinney. He wasn't saying anything. I don't know. I mean, when you see that and you realise, wait a minute, the unionist press says one thing, and the rest of the world, well.
Yes.
I don't know how I've been saying for a while, it's strange seeing what message translates from the chamber to, like, my grand's living room.
Oh, well.
Which is no comment on my grand's living room, but it's interesting to see the nuances of something like the EU debate and all the factors that are kind of engaged in it, and all the people who are involved, and then how that's, if you like, scrambled and put into words in the dailies, and then how that is translated and taken away by people. And it's interesting to see what final message gets through.
Well, that is the one that counts, of course. But it's a bit arcane. This whole EU thing is such a incestuous topic for the politicians.
Yeah. Well, it's and for people who follow the subject matter and international and EU law scholars, it just seems ridiculous. It seems like a kind of storm in a teacup kind of thing. But the message which is maybe getting through is something different. The message which is getting through is, if you like, not even a word or a sentence, but just a big question mark over something which is not really seen as...
The plan is FUD. It's all right. It's a perfectly respectable word these days. Fear, uncertainty and doubt.
All right.
And that is simply the No campaign's plan. You sow fear, uncertainty and doubt all the time. The only trouble is they've gone so far that when it came to that Scotland Tonight Monday night interview with Bernard Ponsonby, the question of political suicide came up, of course. Is the Labour Party in Scotland embarked on putting Scotland down to such an extent they'd rather, they're quite happy now to have, as long as they win the referendum, they'd even be happy for the SNP to win the 2016 Scottish election, as long as they defeat this referendum. It's all or bust.
They don't seem to be putting up. I would agree with that to a certain
They're just
extent,
putting Scotland down all the time.
But they're also trying. They're trying so hard to put the Yes campaign down and put the SNP down and put particularly Alex Salmond down that they're willing to throw absolutely everything at it. And they may convince people, if they do that for long enough, to vote no, vote against the SNP and vote against Alex Salmond, but they're not going to convince anyone to vote for Labour or for Joanna Lamont.
This is the thing. Where is the positive message for the union? I mean, people are asking that increasingly on social media anyway.
Yeah.
There doesn't seem to be a positive message coming out of that group. They seem to only exist to, as you say, knock constantly. And I find it really quite depressing. I find the immaturity of the level of debate that they're conducting at the moment really pretty pathetic and very sad. And I find it, I think it's really sad that people out there are not going to be able to hear both sides of the picture. I'm sure they must have some positive case to make for the union somewhere, but where is it? Yes is trying to get the message out. You've got cross-party political support now. They're trying to get the message out there. It's difficult with a press that is not necessarily keen on that message.
It seems to be committing political suicide as well. Both the Scotsman and the Herald, they're both pro-union. Their sales are collapsing at an incredible rate. You think they suddenly think, wait a minute, because I could see both of them off the streets within a year's time before the referendum.
That's not good for anyone.
Whereas the present journal apparently is much stronger. It's gaining sales.
Yeah. Is it? Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. The Sunday Post?
I don't know.
But I just think, the number of people I know who just don't want to buy the Scotsman anymore. And increasingly, I think the Herald as well. They're having problems with both those papers. You must have balance. How can you possibly? I don't see if people never see their opinions reflected back to them, or an opinion that they can at least identify with reflected back to them, or rarely. Why would they spend their money on them? So I wish they'd think a bit more.
We've had about 25 minutes. Let's not bore our viewers or listeners. It's been very entertaining so far, and thank you very much.
Thanks for having us, Stuart.
Deputy Lord Provost Deirdre Brock, Councillor Anna McVey.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart.